Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a little bit different. I'm going to be using this reference photo that I just took of a rose from my garden, and I'm going to kind of do something fun with this. I'm going to paint a little composition, and then I'm going to add this kind of on top inside the composition. So I'm using this as kind of a guide and just getting my color ready. I'm using some yellows that were already mixed on my palette. So when you're using a reference photo, you kind of want to break down the individual shapes that you're seeing. And I've got this main oval that I kind of want to block out. And when you're painting loose flowers, it's kind of up to interpretation how you go about painting it. The goal is not to be photorealistic, it's just to capture the feeling and the movement of the flower. You don't have every single petal showing, but someone looks at it and says, oh yeah, I can tell that that's a rose, then you've done your job. So I'm kind of looking at these petals as a reference, but I'm taking creative liberties to do what I want. And the rose in my picture is a lot lighter. That's okay. Try not to look at how I am painting it, but rather the principle behind it. So watch how I'm looking at this flower and how I'm kind of breaking that up into little individual shapes. I'm going to go back in once this is dry and kind of add some defining parts to this. But for the most part, that's what it's going to look like. Now I'm going to go into my stem, and I'm kind of following the same thing that's happening here. The stem's kind of curving. I'm being mindful not to touch my rose. I'm just going really close without touching it because your eye will visually place them together. You don't actually have to touch them together. Now roses are fun because they have a little bit, you can kind of see in here, there's like some red and some brown in those leaves. I'm going to try and capture that a little bit. And I'm really just using the edge of my brush, or the shape of my brush, I should say, to get the shape of these leaves. I'm not really trying to form them by outlining it all. I think that's kind of the key with loose watercolor flowers, is you just want to trust the marks that you're making and just kind of go for it. I'm kind of sad that summer is almost over, / kind of excited. I mean, it's bittersweet when summer ends because it means no more fresh flowers, but it also means cooler weather. I don't know where you are in the world, but here it has felt like 1,000,000 degrees outside. I love the heat because it kind of brings new life with everything in the garden, but it's also really, really hot, and I don't love that as much. I mean, my flowers have kind of suffered a little bit. You can see this flower is kind of small. I mean, normally they're a lot bigger than that, so I think the heat has something to do with that. Okay, that's all I'm going to do for the stem for now. I may stop there. I'm going to wait for it to dry, and then I'm going to go back in and add some of those final details. So I'm just going to go back to the color I've already mixed. This is kind of a combination of yellow ochre, quinacridone gold. I've got a little bit of rose doré mixed in here. It doesn't really matter, just as long as you have a good kind of brownish yellow, then you should be fine. Now this is where it kind of gets fun, because you can go in and add that second layer and try and define some of these shapes. So when things start to look a little bit blocky, that's when I go in with a clean brush. It's not wet, it's just a little bit damp, and then you can kind of blend that out a little bit. I don't want to call it scrubbing because you're not being rough with your paper, but that's kind of the motion that you're taking. Kind of doing that scrubbing motion to help it blend. Now with my first layer, I always think it's done, and then I just have to reevaluate and make sure that I'm really capturing what I want to. So that's where I go in and add more layers. I'm going to let that second layer dry while I go back in and add just a little bit of detail in here. I've got some English, well, let's see, this is actually raw umber violet, and I'm going to add in some English red earth. English red earth is a really, really good color. If you're going to buy a new color to add to your palette, I would definitely suggest English red earth. I use it all the time. I love working with reference photos because I can try and capture some of those nuances that are in my photo. So I'm capturing some of that red and brown, and because the paint here on my main stem is still wet, it's going to kind of bleed and blend together. The paint on the stem over here was already dry, so you've got this kind of overlapping color, whereas this is kind of blending out a little bit, and I like a mixture of both. You definitely don't have to wait until it's all the way dry, but if you want the definition, I would wait. I'm leaving space where the details would be so that that light color can kind of show through and act as my detail line. I hope that makes sense. Now over here, I'm going to do the same kind of thing, but on this one up here, I'm only going to paint in this part right here. Just because that underneath part is a lot lighter on here, and I'm going to let that kind of act as the lighter part. Same with right here. It's kind of wonky, but I'm just going to capture that. A little bit right there. There we go. And then one more little spot. I don't know what it is. Adding that deep green just helps everything pop, which is really fun. Now I could go back in once this is kind of dried and add in some veins. I don't think I'm going to on this painting. I normally do. I normally really, really love those extra little lines, but because I'm just kind of shaking it up today, we're just going to run with what I've got already. Now, I think this is, see, I just kind of use what's on my palette, so sometimes it's hard to know exactly what color I'm using, but I believe that this is more yellow ochre. Now this is where I'm kind of using some creative liberty. I know that the center is more ruffled, so I'm kind of creating these ruffly textures in here, but that's not exactly what my photo looks like. Now I know that my flower in person and in my photo is a little bit softer than what I've painted, but that's okay. Creative liberties, right? Now, if you're enjoying me watching me paint from a reference photo kind of like this and showing you my process, I do a similar thing in my online courses. I've got a couple of online courses out right now, and the cart is going to be closing soon. So if you're interested, get in there while you can, because the next time I open it is going to be in 2020. I don't have an exact date of when that will be. You'll have to stay tuned. But when you're watching this video, the cart is going to close the end of September. So be sure to get in while you can. A little bit about the courses if you're interested. I've got a beginner intro to roses course. That one is $30, and it just goes through the very basics of watercolor painting. And then I kind of dive into how to paint roses. I show you roses at different angles, and then we throw them into a couple of compositions. I'm not quite done with this. I just decided. While we're waiting for that to dry, I'll kind of talk through my other courses. I've got Loose Watercolor Flower Academy, and that teaches you how to paint 30 different flowers and leaves. It's a really fun class. I slow it down for you. I explain how to use a reference photo like this to paint the flowers so that you can do it on your own. You don't have to copy another artist, which is really, really fun. And then the last course is called the Beginner's Guide to Watercolor Flower Composition. And in that course, I walk you through exactly what it says. It's the Beginner's Guide to Composition. I walk you through go-to compositions that I use every single time I paint so that I know I'm going to get a nice looking painting at the end. I also provide a few extra little freebies. I'm not going to tell you about them here, but you'll have to check them out if you're interested. I think this painting is finished. I kind of like how it looks with this. So once this is dry, I'll kind of set this in here and it'll look really fun together. All right, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and if you happen to do any of my tutorials on YouTube, please post your work. I would love to see it. I'd love to cheer you on. Just be sure to tag me if you post it on Instagram. Tag me at on Instagram. Snowberry Design Co is how you can find me, and use the hashtag Snowberry Tutorial. Thanks again for watching. Bye.